Oh, Bethesda, what a company. I honestly used to love their games. Fallout, Skyrim, Oblivion, Morrowind, you know the good old days. Starfield was, well, it exists alright, I'll tell you that. But recently, you probably saw how Bethesda announced a lot of stuff. But the thing about the announcement of projects and more was that it didn't sound like it came from Bethesda willingly to do it. Instead, everything said sounded more like Asha Sharma, the head of Xbox, who had like a gun to Todd Howard's back, just ready to fill him with lead unless he finally started doing what players wanted. There's a lot to get into, so firstly, as seen here, Bethesda Studios actually, for the first time since, well, forever, told people what they were doing. I'm not going to read all of it for you because it's long, but it's on screen and I'm going to paraphrase it. Basically, Bethesda says here that they are committed to making games that people love. Weirdly, they refer to their games not as games, but as worlds, which whenever I hear that word, I immediately think, oh god, they're talking about live service games, aren't they? Because that's how corporate people talk about games that they want you to return to, you know, do the daily quest login, you get the idea. So Bethesda referring to their games as worlds, that fills me with dread, but I'm going to hold my disdain for now. Next, they say here that Starfield will continue, which is alrighty then. I mean, I tried to beat Starfield, I got pretty far, but it was so samey and the lore of that game's universe was pretty boring, unfortunately. There were no intelligent aliens like in, say, Mass Effect from what I could tell. Maybe I'm wrong and they appear at the end of the game, I don't know, but from what I played, every alien was just some weird bugger giraffe looking thing that I shot until it stopped moving, and that was pretty much about it. But anyway, Starfield will continue, but they don't say as a new game, they just mean Starfield itself with more creation mod support and more, which is mostly user push at this point anyways. Unfortunately, creations from what I can tell do disable trophies and achievements, so I haven't used any of myself when I did play the game. But when it comes to the base game of Starfield, it is, ooh, yeah, it needs work alright, but by Bethesda's release output, I should expect Starfield Definitive Edition by, let's say 2035 at the earliest. Then they say as seen here that Fallout is the future of Bethesda and they are fully committed to bringing new games to Fallout going forward. Probably this is the most interesting part of all of this, where Bethesda confirms here that both Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas are officially getting remasters and they are currently being worked on as we speak. This is good news because obviously people want to revisit those games for a long time, myself included. Although I'm not going to hold my breath because I have to remind you all that Bethesda also remastered Oblivion last year, but that game, as Digital Foundry said here, is still broken and unfixed a year after release and then some. And currently, there are no plans from Bethesda so far to fix the problems that are already plaguing Oblivion Remastered, so while yes, the prospects of Fallout 3 or New Vegas being re-released is cool, I guess, I have to wonder if those games will also release as buggy, unfinished messes that Bethesda will also abandon before long like they already did. I mean, Fallout 3 was very buggy at release, and that's that, you know, Bethesda charm, alright, they'll try to say, but no, seriously, it's not cute anymore. Fix the game already, Todd. It's almost 20 years old. If that game re-releases that long after and it's still buggy, we may need to just put Todd in a rocket ship and send him on his way through Starfield itself so somebody else can take over. They also say as confirmed here that they're teaming up with Obsidian to make a new Fallout game, but honestly everything said here, like I said, it just sounds like Asha Sharma is pointing a 12 gauge to Todd Howard's spinal column, whispering in his ear, you better tell them Obsidian and that you guys are friends. And Todd is just like, hey everyone, it's me, Todd. No, we didn't lose Fallout exclusivity to create because we took so long making new games and that our new boss is threatening to fire us. No, come on guys, we were always friends with Obsidian. Come on, we wouldn't lie to you, would we? And then Todd is going to shift you to the side, look deep into your eyes like, please get me out of here. Asha Sharma has already shot 6 interns before breakfast. She's building a throne out of their bones. I can hear their screams, guys. Please help. And Asha Sharma will walk in and say, is everything fine, Todd? He's going to stare at us like a man who just met his maker. But according to Todd, publicly, a rivalry? What rivalry with Obsidian? As IGN reported here, Todd said, oh, it's just fan chatter as to Bethesda and Obsidian having beef with each other. As Todd said there, we always had a great relationship with Obsidian, and on New Vegas, there's only one group that we really trust to do this, and it was awesome. For me, it was either this group or nobody. Was it, Todd? Was it really only Obsidian? Is that why for so long you refused to acknowledge that New Vegas existed in the first place because it did so well, and that it was made so quickly that people ended up loving it more than your baby Fallout 3? Is it why you spent an entire live action show followed retconning and removing elements that Obsidian did with New Vegas as well? Again, at this point, I think Asha Sharma has a small bomb implanted into Todd's cranium, and if he steps out of his line even once, she's gonna press that button while she sits on her throne made of bones of interns to blow Todd's head smooth off. Here's what Todd said more of, okay? I appreciate some of the fan chatter, but behind the scenes, there's a huge amount of mutual respect between Bethesda and Obsidian. We're always always kind of wondering if we could find a way to work together in the right way, and when those things come up, I think I definitely look at the franchise all up, as you can see in the notes, everything that's kind of happening with Fallout. Todd then said this: "You sort of say, is there a way or a window or a pocket where we could do something together that really made sense? And so we're super excited about the opportunity working together." Interesting that he puts it that way, considering the fact that Obsidian has made it very abundantly clear in public how much they do not want to make another Fallout game. And before anybody says, well, that can't be true, well, look at this from PC Gamer in November 2025. Obsidian flat out stated they do not want to make a New Vegas 2 or a new Fallout game at all in the coming future. This comes from an interview at the Game Business where Obsidian's VP of Operations and VP of Production, which are these two guys on screen here, Marcus and Justin, they flat out admitted that no, actually, they had zero plans of making a Fallout game and want nothing to do with the franchise. As seen here from the Game Business, where they interviewed Marcus and Justin from Obsidian, and remember, this was all told before Asha Sharma was officially at Xbox. So while this is being said, Phil Spencer is still running things, okay? Keep that in the back of your mind, that as Game Business admits there, a Fallout game from Obsidian would make total sense financially. As the Game Business then said here, yet what might have been good for Microsoft's bottom line wouldn't necessarily be what's best for Obsidian. The developer has a history of making sequels to other people's games, including that aforementioned Fallout title, but over the last decade, Obsidian has focused on building its own IP. This is what Marcus Morgan says during that interview here. Here's what he said: "I know everyone on the internet, on every game we announce, asks, when's the next Fallout New Vegas? When's the next whatever? But this year, all three of the games are IPs that we've created, our history prior to Microsoft surrounded working on others' IP. And this is the joy that we get of, how do we build our own IP? And we've got to the part where we have sequels to all of them." Again, right? A reminder, Marcus is saying all of these things before we all knew that Avowed and The Outer Worlds 2 would end up being massive financial failures for Obsidian. Outer Worlds, especially if you don't know, sold a meager 1 million copies at best across all platforms combined, which for a big AAA Western RPG first-person shooter game released in the fall season no less, that is abysmal. Things change quickly, obviously, knowing what we know now, because less than a year later, Obsidian is now being forced to make a Fallout game, whether they want to or not. In full transparency, the journey around The Outer Worlds 2 and Avowed put our approach to the test quite a bit. There was a little bit of self-doubt or self-questioning of should we be chasing after these aspects of AAA. As we went through that journey, the lessons we learned was stay true to our roots and keep building the games we make as opposed to chasing after others. We are always inspired by all of the RPGs that exist, but we also have our own style of RPG. Chasing after others. Oh, those words are kind of prophetic now, given the situation at Obsidian currently. So they tried to make their own IPs to a degree, and it worked, sort of. I mean, Pillars of Eternity worked well enough that Avowed, which is the same universe, also got made. The Outer Worlds did well enough for a sequel, then it flopped and sold about 20% of what the original did at release. The more I read what these Obsidian guys said, the more it tells me that this entire situation surrounding Bethesda, Obsidian, Fallout, all of it was not anyone's idea, but Asha Sharma's. I mean, come on, dude. That Marcus guy, he then said this: "When I look at Larian's RPGs or Bethesda's RPGs or CD Projekt Red's RPGs, they are compared, but they're all very different. I want a different experience when I go play Baldur's Gate than I do when I go play Cyberpunk. We've worked on Neverwinter Nights, we've worked on Fallout, so it can't help but be somewhat, are we just trying to be like that? Our goal with The Outer Worlds and Avowed is to be more clearly define what it is to be Obsidian as a standalone entity as opposed to chasing after what already exists." Unfortunately for Obsidian, it didn't work out, because again, both games flopped really badly. I don't want to sound too mean, but hey, I gotta be blunt here. These IPs are not going to keep the lights on. Fallout will. And I cannot make this up to show you just how much Obsidian did not want to make a new Fallout game. Then when Justin Bridge, the other guy that they're interviewing, flat out said this during the interview, look at this, guys. "We want The Outer Worlds 2 to be big. It's not that we're not ambitious, it's that we're very realistic right at the beginning of a project, making sure that we know that we can make this game. And we firmly believe that this is something that we can succeed in. That's where the conservativeness comes from. We are pretty picky about the projects and we have a diligent process about it." They actually thought The Outer Worlds 2 was going to be a smash hit when it wasn't. And I know why, because one look at The Outer Worlds 2 tells you everything. It's a game that was so clearly created during the height of the pandering era of games. You know the ones, right? Every character is very diverse. The villain, take a guess. Of course, it's a straight white man. Everything is so by the numbers that what you would expect to form a Western studio, when you think about all the things that could ruin in and close these sort of people down, The Outer Worlds 2 is the epitome of all of that. Granted, at least, The Outer Worlds 2's gunplay is pretty decent, and I could easily see Obsidian taking the bones of what that game was under the hood, putting a Fallout makeover on it, and it would translate pretty well actually. So at least to some capacity, a big chunk of the work for them is done in the gameplay department already. This next part is also prophetic in what happened where that Justin guy would say this: we don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we have one bad project and then the studio goes away. All this ties into, what do we want the game to do? What is an Obsidian game? And if we're going to make a huge bet on The Outer Worlds 2, we want to make sure we feel strongly about that from day one. And again, it sold at best 1 million copies. That failed horribly. And obviously, once the layoffs came, Obsidian was not spared either. 20% of Obsidian was laid off in the most recent Xbox layoffs. Ironically, the same percentage The Outer Worlds 2 sold compared to the first game. That's an interesting parallel. But it seems like to me, as you can see, that nobody in this situation, be it Bethesda nor Obsidian, wanted each other to be anywhere near them when it came to making games in the future. It was very evidently clear during the Phil Spencer era that Fallout, Elder Scrolls, and Starfield was a Bethesda-owned property, and that they wanted no one but Bethesda to make those games because that was their games, right? Their identity. You kind of have to think of these studios like restaurants, you know? Sure, they may have businesses beside each other on the same strip and be friendly, but deep down they know they are, to a capacity, each other's competition in the end. I mean, they have to have known that. Bethesda pretty much wants to make an Outer Worlds game about as much as Obsidian would want to do Fallout, is what it looks like to me. It's very evident that these studios wanted their own core identities retained and their IP alongside it, despite Xbox owning them. And I think one of the only Xbox-owned studios that I can think of that is currently making a game that they originally didn't make prior to this, but they're working on it, is probably Fable with Playground Games, which, you know, they're known for Forza, which is very obviously nothing like a Fable game. So this is now the second time that I can think of off the top of my head in recent years that a company is being forced, like they're basically forcing Microsoft's umbrella to make something that they either don't want to make or aren't even known for, in Playground's case at least. As Obsidian admitted there, when they showed The Outer Worlds 2 to Xbox leadership, they were apparently blown away. That's Phil Spencer, Sarah Bond, and the like. All of whom we know now no longer work at Microsoft for very obvious reasons, because they were terrible at it. Because everything said there is confusing to me from a logistics standpoint. Like, what do you mean that you waited a long time to show your leadership? The game that you were making with their money and their consent, and they saw what you were doing, which was a very pandering-like game with body types and all the other things, and they were blown away. And then when you released it, nobody bought it really. This is toxic positivity yet again, guys. Obsidian even admits as seen here that their goal with this was to become like Larian with Baldur's Gate 3 or From Software with the Souls games. They wanted to be revered and seen in a way like that, but it didn't work. That is crazy to me. And honestly, that's again toxic positivity and also hubris, because there's no way anyone internally looked at Outer Worlds 2 or Avowed and went, oh yeah, this is going to be the next Baldur's Gate, Dark Souls, or Elden Ring. That's peak delusion. People are absolutely not eager to play anything that Obsidian was pushing on players, because the very things they have built their studio on for years and staffed themselves to think like are from a very specific way of thinking. And that way of thinking, as we all know, has often led to many games failing and many studios falling apart, because no one at these studios allows for anyone who thinks differently than they do to work on these games in the first place, given their opinions or anything else. All I would need is 5 minutes to play Outer Worlds 2, and I could have immediately told Obsidian everything that was wrong with their game. I should honestly become a gaming consultant. I could save these studios millions if they just let me look at what they're doing. I mean, they're not going to like me being there. Definitely a lot of devs would be angry if I did that, but come on, man. You guys are wasting money, time, and energy making things for nobody. And this is why, even though Obsidian is now doing Fallout, it doesn't magically mean the game is going to be amazing. Sure, it could look like a Fallout game, have the dirt and the grime and the irradiated ghouls running around naked, but Obsidian these days is fundamentally a much different company than they were when they were making New Vegas. I said this in my other Bethesda video, but Obsidian devs have openly admitted that the DNA and people who work there have changed. Chris Avallone, for example, who helped with New Vegas famously and co-founded Obsidian before leaving after all the legal stuff, go look into it, actually compiled a list of all the people from his time at Obsidian when they made New Vegas versus who currently works at Obsidian right now. Here's the post. It's 2 very long lists of people that Chris goes through figuring out who is still there or not. It's a long list, I know. I'm not going to show them on screen, so I don't even think they could fit on screen, but they're too long to read version basically. The consensus here was that Chris Avalone's final tally came to about 30% of Obsidian that's currently there is the same Obsidian that made New Vegas. That means roughly 70% are new hires that never made Fallout New Vegas, so that does not fill me with confidence here. But it also tells me with this new Fallout game, sure, Bethesda, Obsidian, and Xbox are going to try to pretend like, hey, these are the people who made New Vegas, guys, it's going to be fine. But the reality of the actual number of people there is way, way less than you actually think. Yes, New Vegas's director is still at Obsidian, I guess, but the vast majority of people who helped make it aren't there, and unfortunately, even after the layoffs, I doubt that number's gotten any better. So what we have now is a weakened Obsidian being told to make a game the vast majority of the studio, according to Chris Avalone's list, have no experience in making in the first place. So when people say, well, it's going to be like New Vegas 2, right? Probably not. No. What you're more likely going to get is the writing in Avowed and Outer Worlds 2, but with a Fallout skin that is thrown up on top of it. And since Avowed especially was lambasted for having poor characters, a very weak story, and very bad side quests, none of this fills me with confidence at all. Again, I'm not trying to be some negative Nancy here, okay? I'm just looking logically at what's in front of me, and the numbers and the things being said are telling me this is either going to go two ways. One is Obsidian locks in, stops doing all the BS nonsense, and makes a great game. Or two, we get a very divisive Fallout game that people are going to tear apart, and frankly, I think we're going to get the latter. And I can already imagine the main villain will likely be a straight white male again, only women will disproportionately be in positions of power, and there will be a ton of diversity, like a ton, dude, and none of that would surprise me even a little bit. But to suggest that any of this is a win somehow is kind of wild to me, because it's obvious nobody wanted to do any of this in the first place. The fact that Bethesda was this vocal to the fans like this is only because of Asha Sharma. I mean, look here, right? You even have Todd Howard openly replying on r/games talking about how he wants to be more open with fans all of a sudden. Gee, that seems weirdly out of character for someone like Todd. His usual operation is to release a trailer, go silent for years, and then maybe show up again to reveal something else. Asha probably has trained snipers looking at Todd, forcing him to speak on Reddit now too. This is all because people have lost faith in Bethesda as well. They're not making the games that people want. If they did, none of this would be required of them to do so the way that they're doing it now. The fact that Asha Sharma, as seen here, even retweeted Bethesda's post, and she right away says Todd Howard just shared the plans for Fallout, not Bethesda, not Xbox, Todd Howard specifically. Like, oh yeah, like she knows, dude. She knows that people are sick of waiting, and the radio silence version of how Bethesda has been doing things is not winning them any favors. Xbox is in a bad place, we all know this, and Bethesda has released one game since being acquired with Starfield, and beyond that, they're just adding more to Fallout 76 and Elder Scrolls Online, both of which are games currently with nebulous futures because the layoffs decimated both the teams that made the content for those games. So let's say worst case scenario, the layoffs that happen end up decimating Fallout 76 and Elder Scrolls Online. They cease development, what happens next? The only logical answer is a new Elder Scrolls game and Fallout mainline release too. I know Todd and many AAA want their live service games because they say it funds development, which is true to a capacity, yes. But in Bethesda's case, their games are so beloved and played so often already, even their single player titles effectively also work as live service as well. How many times have they sold Skyrim alone in new versions? I'm not saying the live service Elder Scrolls doesn't sell or do well, but the reality is that everybody wants the next Elder Scrolls to come already. It should have been here by now, but Bethesda has taken so long, there's no way these changes aren't being done to mitigate damage now. And we know that Xbox simply cannot afford any further failures, and I don't blame them because as PC Gamer showed here, that Fallout Obsidian game is being led by New Vegas's game director. I can only imagine how begrudgingly Obsidian is being forced to make this game, but it has to happen. Xbox has spent not one but two whole generations behind its competitors. Microsoft's game studios under Phil Spencer were not being fostered at all. They were just being left to make anything they wanted, which has led to a lot of failures, some successes, true, but the bad is too much to outweigh the good. The writing has been on the wall for a long time as well. Look at this from 2024. Josh Sawyer, right? That's the director of New Vegas. He even said he would be open to another Fallout game even then, but he would have to be able to do it in his own way instead of how Microsoft wants to. And then during a QA session in 2024, Sawyer answered whether he would want to make another Fallout, and here's what he said. Sure, with any project, I think it has to do with what are we doing? What are the boundaries that we're working within? What am I allowed to do and not allowed to do? I think with any IP, especially one that I've worked with before, the question is, what do I want to do this time that I wasn't able to do last time? And if those constraints are really just constraining, then it's not very appealing, because who wants to work on something when the one thing they want to explore is not possible to explore? This is where he kind of drops a bombshell, but people don't really catch it. But Sawyer said more. I love the Fallout IP. I think there's still a ton of stories that can be told world in there and questions that can be asked about society. But yeah, any IP really is kind of like that though. You want to work with this or that, I don't know. What are we allowed to do and not allowed to do? That society thing he said there, that is a red flag that I am sensing that pattern again. I wish I wasn't, but I am. The one mentioned there, right? Society, the way that it's framed, that tells me that Sawyer may want to take an IP like Fallout and use it like a vehicle to speak about the modern deisms of today. But I'm just going to nip that in the bud right away, because here's why that couldn't work. Because Fallout, big surprise, is not the real world. It is also set in an alternative future, as we all know. Obviously, we didn't have robot butlers in our houses in the 1950s or whatever, unless I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure we didn't. Fallout's entire setup is that the society we live in today never came to be, because how could it have manifested if nukes dropped and everybody turned into ghouls or monsters? So trying to take our society, which is objectively not representative of Fallout society and never could be, because again, social media, YouTubers, current day presidents, or anything like that would objectively not existed or had the opportunity under the rules of Fallout's universe. And that's why I'm already getting big red flags reading what Sawyer said there, because if his plan, which is clearly the plan of many Western game developers like him, is to just inject the modern day where it doesn't belong, then the same thing will happen regardless, which is you're going to make a game for nobody but yourselves, and it will fail. However, since this is Fallout, I wouldn't say it can fail either way, but it will at least hamper how well it could do absolutely. This is my problem with current day Obsidian. They're unable to let go of the world today because they feel the same way, let's say, BioWare did making Dragon Age the Veilguard, where they needed to inject everything that they believed in too. They see every day and they think matters into these worlds where these concepts would simply just not exist. Like Dragon Age Veilguard infamously having the non-binary plot point we all know about. It makes no sense within the confines of that world whatsoever. But because you injected something modern like non-binary into a fantasy world that is very clearly not our world, because we don't have horned dragon people or elves or people using magic or elven gods invading from other dimensions, it makes the injection of these shoehorned in aspects ruin the integrity of not only the game's world, but the developer's inability to create true escapism. So circling that back to Fallout, if Sawyer's plan is just, I want to make a Fallout game that reflects the political climate and state of our world today, then this game is cooked before it's even beginning. Because Fallout, again, for the millionth time, is not our world. We do not live in a post-apocalyptic state. Last time I checked, Deathclaws don't exist. Nor does a two-headed bear on the California Republic flag, or people who are ghouls that can live in radiation. Well, maybe in Los Angeles, but you get the idea. The thing that annoys me the most here is that from what I'm seeing here is that Obsidian has not learned their lesson at all. It's very evident that the events of what's gone on in the world has shaped Obsidian's games for the worse, same with BioWare and many, many others. These development studios' inability to separate from fiction is costing millions of dollars in losses, and these devs will cry online saying the industry cannot foster its future because of layoffs. But if the only games getting made are ones where we need to inject the current day climate into them where they have no business being, then the products being made are representative of a much more alarming issue, which is a pure disconnect between what players want versus what's being given to them. The Outer Worlds 2 is a great example because it is objectively the most current Obsidian game release schedule-wise, and when you look at the bones of that game, you quickly realize it too is another Obsidian game made where they clearly took their politics and their stances and funneled it into a world that was not better for it. This is why personally, if the only Fallout game I can get in the future is a Fallout game in name only that spits on its legacy, hates its consumer base, and is made by bitter developers who are mad that they are being forced to make something that they don't want to make in the first place, then personally, I would rather there just not be a new Fallout game at all. And the same goes with Dragon Age. I'd rather pretend that Veilguard never happened and we just ended with Inquisition instead. Because Veilguard did irreparable damage to BioWare and Dragon Age's name. The idea of a bitter and battered Obsidian that has suffered layoffs and hates their consumer base, that is angry, making a Fallout game where it will likely condense an entire section of America as people and frame them as bigots or people they hate while offering no other avenues to explore, is likely going to lead to a game that critics are going to love, but the audience is going to walk away from. Which ironically is exactly what happened with the Outer Worlds 2 and Avowed, by the way. They reviewed pretty well in the 80s if you want to know a Metacritic, but when you look under the hood, you realize, oh yeah, okay, they got the reviews that they did, because everyone who reviewed those games agrees with what Obsidian is saying politically or socially within them. So I would not be surprised if this new Fallout game ends up being the same thing. The critics love it, like they did Veilguard, but the audience, who's removed from toxic positivity and yes-banning everything, can objectively look with it and go, yeah, this is hot garbage and should not even exist. And then the same cycle continues of, you are all this word or that, no you are, blah blah blah, and the cycle begins anew. It's about forcing what they want to see in the world through the things they create. Now, if Obsidian wanted to be based, they could make a Fallout game about a mega corporation within that universe that wastes resources and ruins the lives of those around them them as a big FU to Microsoft themselves, but I doubt they would do that. It's very likely whatever they are going to make is going to be a critique on internet culture, YouTubers, certain presidents and the like, society, as he said. But again, none of that would work in a Fallout game because objectively those ideas never existed within that universe to begin with. But I don't think Obsidian cares about that. They just want to push what they believe, even though they tried that twice already in a single year, mind you, and failed both times very poorly at it. I doubt people like Sawyer's going to care either way. He'll likely enjoy going out with a bang and bringing down all of Obsidian and Fallout with him if it meant he could point his middle finger at the people he disagrees with politically, I guess. And eventually, probably the Fallout IP, if mismanaged by Obsidian and Bethesda, gets to a point of irredeemable levels, they will just license it out to some other company to make a game instead that isn't abysmal dog water that is designed to hate its audience in the first place. The unfortunate truth is that everything Bethesda and Obsidian have been doing lately has not, and I can't stress this enough, been resonating because of how on the Bethesda side, they're just culturally out of touch with pretty much everything and moving at a glacial pace. And then on Obsidian's side, they're too invested into trying to force their politics into everything they make that they just end up making games meant for nobody but the people who work at Obsidian. Honestly, the absolute state of Fallout, especially within the confines of what's going on here, is probably the worst of both worlds, if I gotta be real. You have people who don't want to work on this IP being forced to, and the people who want to hold on to the IP being told to let go, which is going to anger them because they feel being the exclusive makers of that IP somehow gives them legitimacy. But if neither group is willing to make things work, what we're going to be left with is Corpo Slot being pushed out of Xbox's nether regions because Asha Sharma wants her new Fallout game. I don't blame her, to embolden Game Pass and make people care about Xbox again. I mean, it's a bold idea at least, and we know Bethesda is just not the right developer like they used to be because we've known about the Fallout 3 remaster, by the way, since a leak in 2020. How is a game from 2009, I think, got a leak in 2020 that it's being remastered, and that remaster is still not out 6 years later? That can't be how Bethesda operates and thinks that it's healthy. I just refuse to believe it. Honestly, Bethesda is easily one of the most frustrating companies or development studios in Western gaming by far. So much potential and amazing IP under their belt, and they do nothing with it for years. And the fact, if it wasn't for one lady at Xbox pointing a Barrett 50 cal at Todd Howard's head, they wouldn't have even have been this open with any of us, and we all know it. I'm convinced if Asha didn't force Todd to get into gear, that supposed Fallout 3 remaster wouldn't be out till maybe, I don't know, 2028 at the earliest, almost 10 years after it was leaked to be in the works. That's that Bethesda magic, baby. I don't know, man. In case you haven't noticed, I don't have a lot of faith in Bethesda nor Obsidian anymore. I want to be proven wrong. I really hope I am, but the writing is so evidently on the wall for these two places and what they're prioritizing over what actually matters that I can't be bothered to believe them until I see real action. Either way, this new Fallout game especially, I have almost no hope for it. I gotta be real. It would have been better to give this new IP. I can't speak anymore. This IP to some studio outside of Xbox at least, for a fresh pair of eyes to try something new. Instead, we're probably going to get another creation engine Fallout that looks horrible, that runs badly when the game director and his fellow co-workers refuse to separate the fictional world that they are tasked with operating within from the world they see outside that apparently oppresses them so badly when it doesn't, even because they live in America of all places, which is easily, no matter what they say, the most free nation on earth, and that cannot be understated. Can you tell that I'm annoyed? Because I am. But let me know what you think as always. Subscribe if you'd like to. If they do a new Fallout, what's the setting? Where are they going to go? I guess let me know. I would love a prequel game myself. I would want to see the Fallout world set somewhere in like the first 50 years of the nukes going down. I want to see the actual chaos and insanity that was happening and created in the literal fallout of the apocalypse. But if this Fallout game isn't dark and moody, but it's instead more theme parky like Bethesda 76 or the Amazon Prime show, no thanks. I'm not interested.